We have a really exciting episode right over here with the Rav Ari Dembi, Rav Ari Dembitzer. And many people know him as the head counselor of Lifeline Camp Simcha Boys for many, many years. And he's also, in the past few years, the Rav of Omaha, Nebraska. Nachi, what did you think of the interview?
The interview was really awesome. All the way from Omaha, Nebraska. You're probably thinking again, what? How did he get here? What was he doing in New York? It wasn't easy to pull off this interview. I think we did it was like 1 a.m., but it was pretty epic. There's a lot to learn from it, and he's a pretty meaningful person.
Yeah, it was great. We're actually very thankful to him because he's in New York barely ever, and when he is, he's in Glen Spey, New York, in Camp Simcha. But he was in New York during the winter for one night and for the Chai Lifeline dinner, and he agreed to do this podcast episode with us. And without further ado, here is Rav Ari Dembi. Welcome to the Meaningful People Podcast, the podcast where we talk to people who are
Meaningful.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, here we are with the one and the only Ari Dembitzer, Rav Ari Dembitzer, also known as Dembi, Rabbi Dembi, all the way from Omaha, Nebraska, here in New York. Thanks for coming on.
Honor to be here.
Okay, cool.
Excited.
So you're currently living in Omaha, Nebraska, but you're originally from where?
A random place far out called Flatbush.
Wow, interesting. Mm-hmm. I think for most of the people that know you and most people that don't know you, they wouldn't classify you as the typical Flatbush guy.
I tried hard to get there. Yeah.
Were you the typical Flatbush kid, or not Flatbush kid? Someone who like they saw you and like, oh, he's from Brooklyn.
I think there was a point in my life where people would have said, "Yeah, you're from Brooklyn." Yeah.
So how you're in Omaha? How do you get there? I'm sure there's a lot in between there and there.
So I'm turning 43 in a few minutes. So
are you really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh!
So a bunch of years ago.
It's 11:58. Does that mean in 2 minutes from now?
In 2 minutes from now.
Wow.
That's not planned.
No. I always said I always want to be on a podcast with Rav Ari Dembi on his 43rd birthday. So this is like bucket list.
Wow.
Boom.
Checking it off. So yeah. So what were you saying?
So there was a time that I was a Brooklyn guy, I think. I don't know what a Brooklyn guy means, but I think my ambition and the life that I knew was limited to Brooklyn.
Before we delve in deeper, how you got to Omaha, what you're doing in Omaha, the difference between Omaha, Nebraska and Flatbush. What's that like?
Whew. Let's start with the similarities.
There's humans. Got it.
The difference between Omaha, Nebraska and Brooklyn, New York. Tonight I was at the Chai Lifeline dinner. There were more Jews in the room than in the entire Nebraska. That's an exaggeration. But the difference between Brooklyn and Omaha, Nebraska is Brooklyn, I'm one of many tens of thousands more. And in Omaha, Nebraska, I'm not a pretty big deal. I probably would not be such a big deal in Brooklyn, but I'm a big deal in Omaha, Nebraska.
And you're currently the Rav of
a Orthodox synagogue in Omaha. There is no Orthodox synagogue in the entire Nebraska besides us, and in South Dakota, and in North Dakota, and in Iowa. So we're the only show in town.
And I was there once. You guys have a relationship with the Reformed synagogue and the conservative synagogue. What's that like? Or some form of connection with all the Jews there?
Yeah, it's a beautiful community where all the Jews are very much connected, and it's a great opportunity for someone who wants to live an idealistic lifestyle to be able to impact and deepen other people's Jewish identity. And that's part of why living in Omaha is awesome, is that everywhere you go is an opportunity to make a good impression or bad impression. And I feel like I represent Torah, for better or for worse. And I feel like every day is meaningful because every conversation that I have the opportunity of bringing goodness and I think being Mekadosh Shem Shemayim in everything that I do. That is, I'm sure one can do that in Brooklyn as well. I think that it's In Nebraska, I find myself loving life and getting up in the morning very excited to constantly affect people in a very deep way.
It seems like it's, you're the 10th man, in a very metaphorical way. You make the minyan, whereas in an in-town community, you could be one of 500 in a shul.
Yeah, I'm very proud to say that that's not the case anymore, and we have very large minyanim.
Oh, really?
I'm very proud to say that. It took some work and some help. But yeah, no, there's definitely truth to that. Meaning there's one minyan in town and one, at least halachic minyan in town. And you got to get on time, and you have to be on time. I grew up with Landau Stiebel down my block. Beautiful. I probably missed more minyans with having Landau Stiebels, having every 15 minutes having minyan, than my entire time in Nebraska, which I don't think I've ever missed minyan. So
wow.
For those who struggle with minyan in the 5 towns and in Brooklyn, move to Nebraska.
That's the answer.
That's the
how many from Jews are there currently in Nebraska?
That's a loaded question.
Is there a loaded answer?
Yeah. Well, first of all, what does from mean? Second of all, what does Jew mean? So there's a lot of different levels. The short answer is we probably have, if all those who are Shomer Shabbos come to minyan, we probably would have a Shomer Shabbos minyan. But some of the Shomer Shabbos people don't come to minyan. So it's a loaded, there's probably at this point in Omaha, I would say 20 from people, give or take, a few kids, etc. Yeah.
You mentioned before that you're coming from the Chai Lifeline dinner.
Mm-hmm.
First question is, how long have you been involved in the Chai Lifeline?
A long time.
You're 43.
Now, I am 43.
Boom.
But yeah, you're 43 right now.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. 43. Gam, mem gimel, gimel mem.
Or mug.
I'm going to go with the positive.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the positive, which is inclusive and adding.
Oh, I wasn't saying mug like someone like fighting and mugging. I was saying like drink. You make a bracha on them.
Right, cool.
Okay. But Gam.
Still going to go with the Gam.
Yeah, Gam is still better.
I started out as a counselor in Camp Simcha a bunch of years ago. I was not let back.
I always heard rumors.
There's a legend.
Yeah, there's legend says that you were
kicked
out of camp.
Yeah, it sounds better, but I was not let back. It wasn't that I was kicked out.
That's not as.
You know what? We'll say that I was kicked out.
Why were you allegedly kicked out?
I guess I wasn't. I was pretty wild.
Yeah. My experience in camp, and I know a lot of people are there now. Camp is a very exciting place. It's typically when someone thinks of a camp for sick children, it's going to sound depressing, but it's the opposite of that. But it sounds like it was a lot calmer before you were head counselor there. Is that accurate?
I think it was different.
So
it was a little bit different.
So what did you do that changed? Like, how did you do that?
That's a good question. How did I affect change?
Yeah.
In that way?
Like, I know a lot of people, they think about Camp Simcha and they think right away Ari Dembi. And if Ari Dembi wasn't there, they'd be like, what would be with Camp Simcha? Which I'm sure it would go on and it would be a different tone. But your role there is, as long as I've been there, involved the past 10 years, vital for the camp, the kids. So you're doing something different than typically. Yeah, I was hoping
asking a bunch of different questions.
Yeah, so
I think my role evolved. I think maybe the success that I had in camp was that I worked really hard to move beyond myself and to try to go beyond my comfort zone and lead other people in that same direction of, getting over oneself and breaking down inhibitions. I think that evolved over the years, but I think that's something that if I look back, I think that was a big message that I did for myself, and I think I like to share that with others as well, to break down inhibitions and to try to get out of our own heads and to think about other, and therefore, by definition, needing to break down the things that inhibit me from thinking about somebody else.
And what made you get to that, to be able to break past self for it to grow? Like, where'd that voice come from?
Where did it come from that I heard the voice to grow?
Yeah, you said you pushed through to grow and just get out of your comfort zone. I think a lot of people sometimes hear that voice, but they just don't go with it and they just fade away.
Okay, I mean, I'll speak idealistic. I don't know if this is what I was thinking about 15 years ago. I'm not sure if I was. Probably wasn't. I probably wasn't thinking. But now I would say that I think the trick is to figure out why we're here in the first place. And if I'm just enjoying life for the moment that I'm in right now versus how do I make my life more impactful and meaningful beyond this moment and beyond where I am right now. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense.
just to pull it back from listening, and this is the first time I've met you. I've heard about you, pretty big legend. And so you just mentioned that you were a counselor in Camp Simcha.
I was a bad counselor.
And then you weren't let back.
Yeah.
And then Yaakov alluded to the fact that you are now the head counselor for how many years? So
I was a bad counselor, but I was a good head counselor.
And a terrible waiter.
There's probably truth to that. Yeah.
I mean,
had that happen.
I don't know the stats, but you're probably like one of the only. It's like someone getting fired as a salesperson coming back as a boss. That's.
I think it's more often than you think it is. Meaning, sometimes motivation when you're rejected from something, you want to try to prove to yourself or to other people that you can do it. And sometimes the motivation is external. Maybe that's what happened here. I'm not sure. I'd like to think that it's more than that, but I think that there is sometimes when you get rejected, you want something more,
From what I understand, I helped you with some interviews, which I feel cool about, with some humble bragging about that.
You helped me?
I helped you with doing some
staff
interviews.
Yeah.
Man, he doesn't even remember. It was really unmemorable.
It was a lot of interviews.
So that's where I'm going with that. You do a lot of interviews. What do you look for the type of staff for these children that their parents are giving them away for 2 weeks, but it's their babies and they're sick, and how do you choose a counselor to take care of these children?
So I think I always thought big picture, meaning I think most people that want to come to a place like Camp Simcha want to give. Some reasons shelo lishma, some reasons are more lishma, but they really want to give. Whatever the reason is, they still want to give. I always try to create a diverse base, a diverse staff, and I always like to try to make the backgrounds of all those volunteers be from different backgrounds, because I think that creates a unified, great environment where people want to be a part of. That's really what I would always look for, big picture. But I think one-on-one, you're looking for a healthy person, for someone who wants to, as much as possible, give, not to plug holes in their own lives, but their lives are good and their lives are, somewhat productive, and they want to just add some whipped cream onto their life, and they want to add some goodness to what they're already doing. I think a lot of times when we do chesed or we do anything that we do, and if it's plugging a hole, if I'm a very insecure person, it's plugging a lot of holes in my life, I end up needing it more than it may need me. So I try to I have looked for healthy young men who really want to give and are living productive lives, because then they're giving in a much healthier way without necessarily needing to get something back.
Was there ever someone who came for an interview and did something that's very memorable to you that you remember, or they stood out specifically?
Present company excluded.
What?
Present company excluded.
Me? I didn't do anything. I'm like, hey, my brother was there. Can I come?
There's anything that stands out? Not really. I mean, sometimes like people would try to show off how geschmack they were, and that would just make me feel very uncomfortable. Like if you're one-on-one with somebody and they're like singing opera, what do you do? Like, where does that leave the person that's interviewing? It just, so that would never work. It's like trying too hard. So
there's a guy listening to this interview who's like, ways to impress Dembi, and it's like crossing out opera.
So Camp Simcha is known as the happiest place on earth. And I'm sure there's many people that go there, and there's even more people that have been affected by it in a positive way who have siblings that go, and it looks amazing. You see the videos come out of there. But, having such a happy place like that and what you guys do for those kids, also there are moments where it's not so happy. Sometimes there are kids that are there one summer that unfortunately don't come back the next summer. So being the head counselor and being the role that you're in, how's that? If you could talk a little bit about that, handling that on a personal level, on a staffing level.
I mean, I think one thing that we can learn from a place like Camp Simcha is that happiness is not necessarily based on something that one has or one doesn't have. Happiness is the ability to face something that one has. So, yeah, I mean, there are people, we say, Lora Isi Tzadik Nezav, like there are people who suffer a lot in this world and are the happiest people in the world. And yet we know many people that have everything and they're completely miserable. So I think one thing unfortunately, we learn from children who are sick and children who pass away is that happiness is not about what I have or even, my achievements, but it's about who I am and my ability to face every situation that I'm in. I mean, I don't know if you're looking for that philosophical answer to that question, but I think having a broken heart or being sad and feeling pain is not necessarily a contradiction to joy. I think if I feel it, and if I feel all those things and I'm honest about it, and if I really feel those things, I actually can get to a really joyous place. It's just a matter of, being fully present and being able to feel all those feelings. I think Camp Simcha really, it challenges any type of stereotype of, if anybody, God forbid, someone gets sick, that person can't be happy. I think we learn very fast that that's the opposite.
I'm going to hone in on that question. A personal level. I mean, I was in camp for a few years. I don't know that many people that personally passed away, but when it did, it definitely does something to someone's psyche, and it's big. Your role, is to a lot of times get close to a lot of people that are there, and you've, amongst a lot of people there, probably know a lot of people that have passed away. How do you personally deal with that? Or is there a method? Is there a trick? There's
definitely no trick. The more you give to somebody and the more that person is not in your life anymore and they pass away, that leaves you empty and that leaves you broken. And, if you don't cry when you're a baby, you end up crying when you're an adult. So, you feel every feeling and you don't deny yourself those feelings when they happen, and you move through them to the next stage. So, I mean, again, I don't think there's a trick. I think pain, or I think we view somebody being strong as somebody who doesn't cry. I think that's not true. I think strength is vulnerability. I think strength is the ability to be vulnerable, to be honest, to feel feelings. And then you move forward, because that's life, and you have to, learn from every experience and be able to deepen every experience that you have and live for those who are not living. Be a Kaddish.
Is there, this is good, intense, is there someone specific that passed away that you think about? I'm sure you think about so many of these people, but right now you're 43. Is there someone who's the first person that you think of?
No, there's no one specifically. Mm-hmm. I mean, the first time, again, I'm doing this for 1,000 years. So the first year that I was doing it, I probably didn't know emotionally how to approach it. And I probably, I can think of the first funeral of a child that I went to. And no, there's no one that stands out more than anybody else. Mm. I think maybe the position that I'm in, that I know going into it, that this is a reality that I can be confronted with, maybe that puts it in a different perspective. If that makes sense.
And it seems like you spend the summer, teaching a lot and showing a lot of strength and giving these kids a good time.
I want to correct that. I don't know that my primary role has been for the kids. I actually think the primary role has been for the young guys, the volunteers and the counselors. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's more teaching going on there. But okay,
right.
Go back to your question.
How does that carry over, to going back to Omaha, Nebraska? Does that play a role in?
So I think it's all the same. I think it's all the same, meaning, and this is not me, but what I like to share and I like to live and be is deep. And deep doesn't mean, that's so deep. That's such a great deep idea. What deep means is to appreciate things and to think about things and to think about relationships and to think about life, to think about my time and to think about my possessions, and to just be conscious about them and to be aware of them. And I think that is very much about Kim Simcha, about appreciating our own physical health and our life. And I think it's also about Judaism. I think that growing up in Flatbush and growing up in a world of rote, in a world of societal religious ideals or societal pressures, I think we forget that. I think we forget the value of our spiritual Judaism, which is deep and incredible. And the more I learn and the more I work on myself, and the more anybody learns and works on themselves, they see how valuable and how much treasure and how much value there's in everything that we're doing. So I think in Omaha, Nebraska, where again externally perhaps there's less observant people, I think it's the same message. And that message is that Judaism is not about gefilte fish, and life is not about Lexuses, and Judaism is not about having a Pesach Seder, but what goes on at my Pesach Seder. Judaism is not about a bar and bat mitzvah. It's not about all those things. Those are ceremonies that are supposed to be filled with meaning and content. That I connected to.
Yeah, you did a great job, and I think this is appropriate. But it seems like what you're saying, and you wear a green yarmulke, and sometimes you'll wear a t-shirt, with a suit. You said you mentioned before we came on here, you don't wear suits often. That's not to
my
you.
Wife's not hearing this. Yeah,
but to you, that's not what Judaism is about. It's not about your appearances. It's not about how you look.
Look, I think everything goes into the effort. So if there's the same amount of effort that goes into dressing a certain way to conform, and if I put the same amount of effort to dress a certain way not to conform, I think they're both negative.
Right.
So if my focus is the external, it's always going to be negative. I hope that I'm not putting so much emphasis not to conform. I mean, there's a certain amount that I think, I don't want to talk about how I dress. We could. Especially if my wife's not listening, we could talk about how I dress, but there is a certain amount that I do at this point believe in terms of like the rabbinics of where I am in Omaha, Nebraska, which I think there are people that have a little standoff and they get nervous when they see an Orthodox rabbi, and all of a sudden they see me and they're like, "Whoa, you're like this ripped jeans rabbi. Like I never saw you that. You're not even Reform or conservative. You're Orthodox." And I'm not saying that's my goal, but that engages them, and that actually makes them, I think a little bit more like, hey, maybe this religious Judaism is not necessarily about external practices, but there's something more there. I'm not saying I think that much into it when I put on a green yarmulke, but it could be there's a little bit of truth to that.
Would it make sense to, like, I know for a little, if we were doing this podcast 15 years ago and you came from the Chai Life and dinner where you would have worn a suit, and then we're about to start this, that you would have probably taken off your tie and your jacket to I guess, be more of like, no, I'm not going to be that guy.
Yes.
And now you're like, yeah, I'm wearing it.
It's very accurate. Now I'm 43, so old.
What? No, okay, but it's not just with age.
If you were 42, I mean, like 12 minutes ago.
That was so long ago. 3 minutes ago. Yeah.
Ages ago.
Yes, that's definitely accurate. I think it's definitely accurate. I think that we on both sides of this, again, I don't know who's listening to this, but
it's just me and Nachi, by the way. No one else is listening to these things.
I think there is a certain amount of focus on external. And I think, I maybe just personally, if I can share this personally, I think a few years ago would have been important for me to break that down. It's probably less important for me because then I'm giving value to it by wanting to break it down, if that makes sense.
Everything you're saying makes sense.
Okay, cool. It's 12 at night.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing a pretty good job.
Okay, cool.
How many hours did you sleep last night?
5.
That's very little. Do you typically sleep for 5 hours a night?
Yeah, maybe 6. 5 and 6.
Why are you sleeping for so little?
The story of the Gedolim who sleep 5-6 hours and they wake up and take chatzos. That's not me. But I do. I don't know. I wake up pretty early. I give a little share before davening, and also have kids who wake up in the middle of the night. So I try to prepare a little bit before davening. And, I get up very early, which is the opposite of someone who grew up down the block from Landau's.
I know big, not big, an important chunk of your life you lived in Israel, and there's definitely a certain part of your heart that I saw you, I'm like, this guy is a classic American who goes to Israel and lives in Israel. What part of Israel is just in you that's still there that you're trying to bring to Omaha?
So, Yaakov, don't laugh, but I'm a big chassid of Rav Kook.
Why would I laugh?
Because it's been 15 minutes since we're talking, and this is the first time I mentioned him.
I'm very impressed. I kind of make fun of him that he's very into Rav Kook. There's not something to make fun of, but I told him before, I said...
What does into Rav Kook mean?
So I've had a lot of questions in my life, meaning like philosophical questions in Yiddishkeit, and I think he answered a lot of the questions. That's what it means. So...
And now I told him he can only mention him 42 times in this podcast, so he's got it. Yeah, 41 more. 42, because birth 43. Okay.
So into it means that Rav Kook is really focused on what's the role of the nation of the Jewish people, universally. Like, what's the point of the Jewish people, which I think a lot of Radbanim we're not so focused on. We're focused more on an individual and my individual path and what do I have to do to be Yerei Shemayim. And I think Rav Kook is really into... And a lot of what he writes about is what is the point of the Jewish people? What is the point of Eretz Yisrael? What is the universal, the spiritual idea behind it? So in the beginning of Orot, which is a beautiful work, very deep and not so easy, he really discusses that Eretz Yisrael is not about anything that we think that it is. Meaning that it's, sometimes we like to go to Israel for Sukkot because it's a lot of fun. And there's a lot of different parties that we can go to, or the restaurants are good. There's a lot more kosher. We can even learn better in Eretz Yisrael, or it's nicer because of all the hikes that I can go on, which I can't do in the 5 towns or in Nebraska, by the way. So there's a lot more nature, right? All those are great reasons, but that's not the reason why we like Eretz Yisrael, or that's not the reason why we should like Eretz Yisrael. And he explains the reason why we should like Eretz Yisrael is because God said so. And Hashem said there's a place where you, as a Jewish people, have a responsibility to settle and to connect to God and to connect to Hashem through this land, and then be a light and be an example, if you will, but let's just say light, be a light for the rest of the world from Eretz Yisrael, from a place where you can have a country and have a beautiful land and enjoy the fruits of the land and also build a government and also have an army, and all do this based on Hashem's will. That can be only achieved in Eretz Yisrael. So I would love to be a part of that. And I was a part of that short term. Life took me away, at least for now. But I think that's the goal. And then, I think that's a value that most people should yearn for. I mean, there is an idea from Yaakov Moshe Charlap, whose yard site was a few days ago, who was Rav Kook's Talmud, in which he says always that the tzipiyah of the Yeshua, the yearning for the redemption, is always going to be greater than the redemption. Meaning, if I want to be in Israel, if I'm living in Cedarhurst, is that where we are? Cedarhurst, but I want to be in Israel, that's greater than if I live in Israel wanting to be in America. So, I mean, that's a tricky statement to make, because how far does want go to? If I really want to, I would be there. But either way, I do believe that a Jew should be in the land of Israel. That's my own belief system that I subscribe to. I'm sure I've said in the past. Personally, I believe right now that I'm doing what I should be doing in Omaha, and I talk about living in Israel a lot. And, I think that if I wouldn't be living such an idealistic lifestyle where I am, I would want to be back in Israel. But I do believe that right now this is where Hashem wants me to be. I'm I think, doing important work, and therefore I know that I could probably not be doing what I'm doing in Israel.
That makes a lot of sense. So we're in... Yeah.
No, I mean, what does it mean for someone to want to be in Israel? You mentioned that it's our, according to Rav Kook, and which you ascribe to, it's our jobs really, for people listening to this, Lawrence, Brooklyn, Miami, LA, wherever they are.
Puerto Rico.
Yeah, come on. Sorry.
Let's go global with this.
Sorry, PR. But they should want to live in Israel. And it seems that's even maybe more important than physically being there. What does that wanting look like?
Right. That's the question. If I really wanted something, I would be there. I think understanding the difference. I think understanding of, again, this is a lot very heavily influenced by Rav Kook, but the idea is that I can act as a nation from being in a land which is belonging to the nation. Whereas if I'm wherever I am, I'm part of a community, but it's probably more difficult for me to be part of a nation. So essentially, part of the idea of being in my land is also I'm being in the land of my nation. And what happens is that my Judaism is not just about Ari Dembitzer's Judaism, but I'm a part of something much larger, and therefore I'm concerned about the larger, not just myself. Again, I think that's Simcha. I think that's Omaha, Nebraska. I think that when I'm living my life just based on what works for me, what I want, and that could also have even religiously, like, oh, I want to go to Eretz Israel because that's where I learn better. So how many times did I say the word I in that statement? Whereas if I'm in Israel, I'm not saying this is how everybody in Israel thinks and feels, definitely not, but there's more of an option for me to think about nation as opposed to me thinking about myself. You mentioned before in Omaha about the reform and conservative. These are labels. I think that what's more important is, these are the Jewish people, and I have to be concerned about the Jewish people. And if I'm not concerned about the Jewish people, who's going to be concerned about the Jewish people, if not themselves? And as a person who's trying to live an idealistic, meaningful lifestyle, I'm not just concerned about myself and my family. They come first, and my family comes first. But in the context of a nation, Rav Kook has an idea, second idea, maybe third, that the goal of the goal of me is to love all of creation, to love the Jewish people. The way I love all of creation is by first loving the Jewish people, understanding that there's a role for the Jewish people in making this world more of a godly world because I love the world. But again, I start with the small circle, which is me. I love myself, not in terms of too much self-love, but I have to take care of myself and I have to make sure that I'm happy and good. And then from that place to be able to give to my family, from that place, my family be able to give to my community, from that place, my community gives to my nation, and then my nation can give to the rest of the world. That's most doable when I have access to all parts of being a nation, i.e. the land of Israel. That may have been a little
and
bit
you've
much.
Limited research that I've done before this, families from Nebraska or family have made Aliyah, right?
I failed.
Failed.
No, see, it's not. Again, I don't have a goal for people in Nebraska making Aliyah. That's not a goal.
Right.
I don't work. I don't think I work with the tangible results of people making Aliyah. I don't even think that I have a goal of making people religious in Nebraska. I do have a goal of making people deeper in Nebraska, meaning that their Jewish identity should be deeper. Now, how that translates, it could translate to a few men coming to morning minyan that they never came to in their lives. Could be. It could be that there are a few people keeping more kosher. It could be. It could be that there are people keeping Taras HaMishpacha. Could be. It could be that there are people more connected to an Orthodox synagogue and never thought they would ever go to an Orthodox synagogue because they can't sit with their spouses. And here they are going to an Orthodox synagogue, listening to a rabbi yell at them how they should be more Jewish. So, that's how, if you're asking me the tangible results of what I'm talking about, it's not necessarily about living in Israel, but it's about understanding that I'm a part of something much larger. I'm not just an American. And my Judaism is not just, well, look, non-Jews, my neighbors celebrate Christmas and I celebrate Hanukkah. That's not what it is. My Hanukkah has to be a lot deeper. I'm not mirroring what's happening around me. And I think that's the results that I'm really looking for, if I am looking for results. But, that's what I'm hoping to achieve.
So it's 2019. You're Rav in Omaha. You have a bunch of years in Chai Lifeline and Camp Simcha. What would you say, and it's probably a bunch of things, but what would you say is a thing that you see or think is holding back Mashiach from coming now? Ari Dembitzer is making a very strange face at me.
I have no
for
idea.
Those not watching this.
From
your experience, obviously.
What would Rav Kook say?
Ooh.
Okay, so I have no idea.
I got him.
The answer is I have no idea. I mean, you asked me what Rav Kook would say. There is an idea, which Rav Kook says, explaining him a little bit deeper, but there's an idea of a tzipi, the wanting, tzipisa Yeshua. It's one of the questions that we're asked, is that do we want something? Do we want HaKadosh Baruch Hu's revelation in this world to be announced, right? That's the Yeshua. The Yeshua is everyone's recognizing Hashem's presence in this world. And that's a question that we have to answer. Did I ever get to the point where I really want that? But more than that, he explains that it's not even enough to want that. I have to want it so much that I did something about it. And his example that he gives is the periscope in a submarine. He doesn't say the periscope, but the scope where the person looks out to see if there's an enemy ship. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, the guy who's manning the periscope and, he sees an enemy ship and he sees it, doesn't say anything. And then the guy, the enemy battleship torpedoes and the submarine sinks. And then they ask the guy, whatever, the few remaining survivors, how come you didn't say anything? He said, well, my job was just to scope. My job was just to look out. That's not enough. Obviously, it's fine to want something. What are you doing about it? So, I don't know. I'm not a gadol. I'm not, a leader. I mean, I have a shul and I'm a head counselor for camp, but
pretty much a leader.
I think, I think, again, there's Chazal that, discuss the reason for the Churban and the reason of Galus, and we can borrow some of the Chazals and many different ideas. But the one thing I think is if the Jewish people understand what their eternal responsibility is in this world, and we're able to get over or past our own individual ambitions for something greater than ourselves.
It's so funny because those who do know you as a very deep person, a very thoughtful person. But then there's a lot of, I know there's people that come visiting Camp Simcha and they're seeing you on stage. I think they would think the exact opposite. They say this guy is very silly. He's very animated. Is there a point of connection between those two ideas? Well, Rav Kook would say.
It seems like you mentioned before, like there's room for both.
Yeah, there's room for both. But it's true. There is the element of loving life in a very passionate way. I guess you're calling that silly, but there's.
I'm not saying silly is a bad thing. I
love silly here,
but
I'm just contrasting them to.
I'm not saying this is so. I don't want to think, or I do want to think, but I'm not claiming to be so idealistic. But I think the goal of making somebody else happy, or the goal of getting over oneself and being silly perhaps to get somebody else to a better place, is very idealistic. It's very much, again, it's not about just my own pleasures and my own ambitions. You're not in a good place, and I can do something about it. So again, you're calling that silly. I think that it's.
How does one get by that most of that brick wall? And I guess it's not for everybody. Not everybody could put on a tutu and go crazy and paint their face.
I don't know that everyone should do that anyways. Right. A point for another time.
We should bring him to Camp Simcha to show him what it really is. It's a place not everything goes, but everyone grows.
Ooh. Wow, there we go.
That's a Rav Ari Dembi line.
Yeah, but how could somebody break free of that feeling of, I want to help, but I'm embarrassed, or I
think Camp Simcha is just one platform. I think there's other ways to do that.
In life, there is many opportunities.
Many opportunities. Again, I think Camp Simcha is one avenue and probably one type of personality. Not one type, but a few types of personalities. You're right. I don't think it's for everybody, or it should be for everybody. Not everything is for everybody. I do think that what is for everybody is the individuals acting as being part of a nation and getting over my own individual ambitions for something larger than me. We say that when it comes to Menachem Avil, somebody. We say it when we're davening for somebody who's sick. We constantly say, B'toch Shar Chol Yisrael, B'toch Shar Avli Tzion Yerushalayim. Like it's always something larger than us. That's the comfort. That's what makes us happy. And that's our responsibility, is to be part of something larger than just ourselves and what makes us happy.
What are your pet peeves? And it doesn't have to be like those who don't. It doesn't have to be like a serious pet peeve. It could be light. It could be. I mean, what annoys you? What gets on your nerves?
Well, I don't really have any light ones. I only have deep ones.
Oh yeah.
I don't like. I mean, I have an aversion to superficiality. I have an aversion to a spiritless, social, religious world. Where
what does that look like? If you could delve deeper.
Where everyone's doing, and this is not the case, but where people are doing things to fit in, and people are doing things in order to look good in somebody else's eyes, as opposed to understanding why they're doing what they're doing. And if it's always peer-based, and if it's always based on other people's recognition, and we're all guilty of that on some level, and I'm sure myself as well, I think that, we're selling ourselves short. And I think, I think what bothers me, and again, this could be wrong, but I think it's a big chil Hashem when we're not like that, when we're just society based or just trying to come up with societal community norms without reaching beyond it, if that makes sense. That's a pet peeve of mine, and it bothers me.
Like, what's an example of that?
Probably why I moved to Omaha.
What's an example? Like, give an example of something like that.
No.
Okay,
Nah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It seems like
I'm not knocking. I don't want to knock it.
Yeah, no, totally.
Over the last 40 minutes, to me...
40 minutes.
Yeah, right? Time flies.
Only 4 hours to go.
Right. But it seems they're all about the ability to make a difference. When you mentioned the move to living in Nebraska, you're one of not a million, but that comes down to the ability to make a difference. You mentioned Camp Simcha, and when you look at the staff members, each one has the ability to make a difference in a kid's life. Mm-hmm. That's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's tricky.
Untrick it. Let's go.
Mesha Chachma, this week's parsha. Could we do that?
Yeah, we could. Yeah.
No.
This week. I mean, which parsha?
Someone could be listening to this in 6 months, so let's just.
Vayishlach.
Boom.
My bar mitzvah parsha. Mesha Chachma explains that Chazal tell us that Avram kept the mitzvah of Erev Tavshilin, and Yaakov kept the mitzvah of Erev Tchumen. What's the difference? And it seemed pretty random. So the Mesha Chachma explains that that Avram is essentially the first goal, the ideal of the Jewish people, which is to include and to be a light into the entire world. So what's Erev Tavshilin? Erev Tavshilin is that we have this tavshil that makes us be able to cook for a Yom Tov, which is generally a time when we have a lot of guests. And Erev Tavshilin makes me able to do more chesed, to essentially include more people into my house. That's Erev Tavshilin. That's Avram. But in some ways, and we're talking about Avram Avinu, right? The Chazal tell us that all the Geirim that he was Megayer went back to their old ways after he left. Yaakov is how we get there. Meaning, Yaakov is Erev Tchumen, right? And the idea of Erev Tchumen is that there's a limited. I have to be able to limit myself. Meaning, I have to separate myself. I have to work on myself. I have to learn Torah. I have to be able to grow and be the best me. If I'm the best me, and I'm not just plugging holes, it comes back to that. If I'm the best me, i.e. I'm Bnei Israel, i.e. I'm Yaakov of Erev Tchumen, there's a certain limitation, there's a certain boundary of what I let or who I let into my life at a particular point. I'm able to really work on myself to be a Bnei Israel. I'm going to reach the ideal of Avram in a much more strong, eternal, impactful way. So it's true, a lot of times people want to come and make a difference and want to change the world. A lot of times that can be also feeling whole, feeling a void in their lives, coming full circle to that idea. And really sometimes, or not sometimes, probably more often than not, a person has to really work on themselves and daven and learn to become a better, stronger person, because then the impact that they're going to have on the world is going to be stronger and deeper and more everlasting. So the goal could be chesed, or the goal is chesed. But the question is, I have to become more internal to be eternal, to be able to make sure that chesed is actually coming from what Hashem wants and not just what I want. And I think that's tricky. That's my answer to your question.
I don't know. I just want to make sure I'm getting this. And is it connecting to, you mentioned your job isn't to try to make people from, it's to get people to be deeper, right? And that could lead to them being from. So the job is for everyone to know themselves better. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I mean, the from is, we were a people before we were from. So my job is to make people understand what it means to be a Jew.
And is that like, I guess you'd say you're in Kyiv, right? You're in Omaha. You
try not to say that.
He for sure, it's a label.
I know. I'm trying not to label it, but for labeling purposes, and for all intents and purposes, it's
such an in-town type of thing.
I know. I'm sorry. Just bear with me.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that phrase. I don't tell people that I'm in Kyiv. I tell people that I'm in love with the Jewish people.
And do you think, the Kyiv movement would be like wildly successful if that was the outlook? If that we weren't trying to actively make people from, but just to love more Jews?
I think they are wild. I think the Kyiv movement is wildly successful.
Not to say it isn't. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe. I think they're very successful. I guess we are very successful. I think one would say that I'm a part of the Kyiv movement. I don't know if I would say that, but one would say it.
Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Purim, Hanukkah. You're a thoughtful person. Which yontif is there a special place in you? Obviously, they're all very special, but which one is like when it's that yontif, you're like, boom, I feel it.
They make fun of me at shul because I say every yontif is the holiest yontif. I don't have a holiest. I don't have the one that I most connect to. I try to learn as much as possible before every yontif to be able to say that this yontif is the most special. You
feel a difference when you don't learn about the yontif and then go into it and you're like, Sukkot doesn't feel the same.
I know there's a difference. Yeah. I think that one could only experience something, I shouldn't say only, but when a person has knowledge, again, Chazal say that the word yediyah is also intimacy. So when I'm intimately connected to something, is only if I really know what it is. If I don't know what it is, I can't really intimately connect with something. I could like the fact that I sit in the back in my patio in a sukkah because the weather is perfect, and then that goes away when a bee comes. So there's nothing that really stands out. I'm sorry. I don't have.
No, it's fine. I have a similar type of question. There's 613 mitzvahs. So we like to ask a lot of people this
social
question.
Experiment at this point. We're rallying up answers.
Which mitzvah for you do you relate to the most? It could be obviously there's a lot, but which to you do you feel close to?
What's your favorite mitzvah?
Yeah, what's your favorite mitzvah?
I'm sorry, I'm going to say. You ready for this one?
I don't know.
We've heard crazier, but go.
No, it's definitely not what you're looking for. Talmud Torah.
We're not looking for an answer. Yeah. We're looking for your
there's
answer.
There's nothing, I think...
Really? Talmud Torah?
The Chazal say it's Keneged Kulam. I think that I think I can do everything and anything, but if I do it from a place of conscious, I do it from a place of knowledge, it makes everything much more meaningful. So I'm going to go with Talmud Torah.
As we begin to wrap up, something I've been thinking about the whole time is, when you were younger, did you ever envision yourself being where you are now? Or if someone told you, you're going to be the head counselor of Camp Simcha, you're going to be living in Omaha, Nebraska, you would look at them like they're nuts?
Probably. I probably didn't even know where Nebraska was.
It's next to Jersey, no?
Past Lakewood.
I don't know. Again,
were you that open-minded that you thought, okay, no, it could happen?
No, life just made me open-minded. I don't think that I was so open-minded when I was a kid. I think I had the regular ambitions of everybody. Played a lot of sports, went to summer camps, somewhat wanted to learn maybe at some points in my young adulthood. And just
it's amazing where life takes you.
It's amazing. Nebraska is a very meaningful life. I think Cedarhurst is also a very meaningful life. I think where I am or what my profession is less relevant than how do I do what I do or why do I do what I do. I think I think the journey is as important, or if not more important, than the destination. And I think the way I do whatever I do is equally, or if not more important, than doing it.
The last question is, if someone listening to this podcast, they've heard about Camp Simcha, they want to go there, what's something that they could hear from you that if they do this, that will impress you more and say, this is more the type of guy? You mentioned someone who's healthy, okay, got that. What's something if the guy goes, I listened to the podcast and you said X, I raised $10 million. Could I come now? I mean, I don't know what it is, but what's something that you would really like more in the world to see?
They started learning Rav Kook.
Yeah?
That's
That
a
was a
secret.
Oh, that was a joke?
I mean, Yaakov, he still has to reject people. He can't give out the secrets.
No, 100%. And there's just so many people that want to go, which is amazing. Which, by the way, I always say Camp Simcha is the biggest scam in the world. Oh, and thanks for everyone for coming to the podcast. No, I'll tell you why. Because it's really a trick, because so many people are there and they work really, really hard, like very hard. And they came, and a lot of people think they go in to think like, yeah, they're going to have a blast, which they do. But the real enjoyment comes from the giving. But they don't. It's kind of like a lot of people going and think like, yeah, it's a party, which it is, but it's mostly work, you know. So what is the real answer? I just want to get that out there.
What's the question?
So the question is, what's something that if someone listens to the podcast and they go back to you and they say, I did X, Y, and Z, like really, what would impress you? It's not like they're done deal, now they're in, but what would you be like, wow, this is help?
Nothing. There's nothing really that someone's going to say or do that's going to impress me. I mean, I think the important thing to realize is that there's so many different opportunities for a person to get over themselves and to give them. Besides Camp Simcha, Camp Simcha is just a great place to do it because it's organized and there's a lot of other people doing it. There's really nothing that can so impress me. That sounds very much like I'm burnt out, but there's nothing. I mean, I think a person who's very truthful and very honest is always impressive.
Are you going to be in Camp Simcha in 10 years? I know I said the last question, but who cares about that guy? Are you going to be in Camp Simcha in 10 years from now?
So I would hope that there would be no need for Camp Simcha in 10 years from now. If Chas v'Shalom there is a need for Camp Simcha and there's a need for me to be there, then I would like to be.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a real pleasure getting to know you better.
Thank you.
And
I'm honored to be here.
Happy 43rd birthday.
Thank you very much. Well, it's my non-Jewish birthday.
Happy non-Jewish 43rd birthday.
In a week, we'll celebrate Chai Kislev.
Wow. And we'll do this again by the 44th. Very good.
In Yerushalayim.
Amen.
All right. Thank you very much.
Hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did and as much as Yaakov did. I personally have never met Rabbi Ari Dembitzer before that interview, before that podcast. Yaakov, on the other hand, has been to Camp Simcha and has known him for many years. So it was an amazing experience. I hope you guys were able to derive some inspiration from his life, going from Flatbush to Omaha to Camp Simcha. It's an amazing journey. No, Yaakov?
I kind of like that dynamic. We had the reverse with Rabbi Bender. I mean, I've met him before, and you know him very well. So I kind of like when one of us know the person well and one of us like completely never really met them. Right. That's a lot of fun. And
the funny part, Yaakov, is that you don't. It's like famous that you don't know anybody.
That is true. Most of this inside information. Most guests or people that Nachi says like, "Hey, we're thinking about Rav Chaim Kanievsky," and I'm like, "Who is that?" Okay, obviously not Rav Chaim. Him I know, and he's probably not coming on our podcast yet. But I don't know anyone. Guys, if you're listening to this on the podcast, if you could leave a review for us, a written review, that would be immensely helpful for us. Thank you so much. And we plan to be back in the office very, very soon.
Yes, we really hope to be back in the office after this all quarantine is kaput, if that's a word. But if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to leave a comment, a nice comment, and we will reply with like a smiley face. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in once again, and hope you enjoy life. Bye.
See ya.